Okay. Whoops. Getting there. Okay, we're there. Okay, firstly, Mom, where's Mummy? Really lovely to have you with us, as always. Welcome to everybody. And I want to thank Rebbetzin Landau, Aviva Landau, for being here with us this evening. We've tried a few times and it's taken us a little bit of time, but we're very, very happy to have you finally here with us. In between, we also got another teacher, and as Aviva had recommended, and more than that, the amazing things that anybody that has been on either who had our virtual spiritual spa in the early years of COVID, and later on, just a few months ago, our wonderful spiritual spa in Kent. I have a lot of gratitude to Aviva for helping us to secure the funding through the lottery community funding, and that I just thank really Aviva for doing that for us and helping us. And if anybody has heard of Mother to Mother, and if you haven't found out about it, an amazing, awesome organization which she has co-founded and is an incredible, beautiful source for the entire community, and helps and gives a lot to everyone, to the mothers, to the children, because everybody benefits from all. And I just wanted to say thank you for all that you do for all of our communities. And it's an absolute pleasure to have you with us. And we look forward to sharing some insights together with you. So thank you for being with us here this evening.
Thank you so much. It's so lovely to be here. I'm so delighted to be invited. Thank you. Just want to say before we start how inspired I am by this group that meets week in, week out. So many initiatives started during lockdown and kind of fizzled out, but it's really amazing to see the learning going strong, and particularly all the people that put time aside on a Thursday night. It's really, really amazing. And Rebbetzin Dove, I know people say this often, but I do not know where you get the energy from when you're a true example to all of us. Thank you for having us. Tonight, I'm going to talk about lessons from the Parsha, lessons from the death of Miriam. A few weeks ago,
I'm going to just stop one second. I'm sorry, I should have mentioned this, but I've just been asked that we should just add in for refuahs and yeshuas, firstly for all of Klal Yisrael, but especially mention Yaakov Yeshai ben Noemi, Shemaria bat Yael, and one second, sorry. There we go. I'm going to also ask at the same time, while I'm just asking, Avital bat Chana. And if anybody has any very pretty, colorful scarves, somebody who has just gone through surgery and didn't really wants to be able to cover what has her hair that has been shaved off in the middle. And if anybody has any pretty, beautiful scarves, especially in turquoise colors, okay, I'm going to ask you to please be in touch with me so we can share and we can help her through this challenging time. And that's on part of all of us. So thank you. And now we can carry on with the insights. I'm sorry.
No problem. I was going to begin with telling you about something that happened to me a few weeks ago. My car nearly exploded. I was driving home from a school run with a car loaded full of young, excitable little boys from primary school. And suddenly my car started smoking out the bonnet and the steering went. It actually wouldn't steer as I turned a corner. It was really impossible to get it around the corner. I kind of panicked and I quickly navigated and to see that it would be I'd be 5 minutes away from our local garage who could hopefully repair it. I said a tefillah and I kept driving. The smoke kept coming out the bonnet. The wheel was harder to turn. And in the background, I had one of the boys going, "Mrs. Landau, why has the story stopped working? Mrs. Landau, could you put the story back on, please? Mrs. Landau." I had to very patiently explain what was going on. B'chasdei Hashem, we pulled up outside the mechanic, and literally as my car reached the forecourt of the mechanic, it stopped working. Literally as we got there, Chasdei Hashem. As a side point, he said to me when I came to collect it, he said, I do not know how you got here. You are one lucky lady. And I said, it's not luck. I said, I was davening, and I think someone must have been listening. And I think he's of the Muslim faith. And he said to me, well, it's nice that someone listens to you, because my one never listens. So I was going to get into, well, actually the same one, and sometimes he listens, but the answer is no. But that's a discussion for another time, and I left it. But the point of this story is that whilst I did not have my car for a few days, I felt horribly lost, horribly stuck. I couldn't go anywhere. I really wished I could have my car back. And when I had my car back, it turned out the belt had snapped in half. So I really was lucky it didn't just blow up. When I got it back, I enjoyed for a whole 2 weeks, every single time that I got into that car, every single time I needed a quick errand and I didn't have to plan it or ask for a favor or walk or take a bus. And I even enjoyed turning right and turning round a corner and the steering wheel moving as I wanted it to. It was such a relief and such a joy. And I'm embarrassed to say that it's wearing off. And sometimes we're only grateful for something once it's gone. In this week's Parsha, the Jewish people learned the hard way that sometimes we're only grateful for things when they're gone. Of course, I don't need to come on here to teach you how to be grateful, because Rebbetzin is an absolute master of teaching people about gratitude. But what I would like to do is to explore the death of Miriam and find out, why did the Jewish people not cry when she died? Why were they not grateful during her lifetime for everything she had done for them? And try and learn something from this little parsha in the Torah. And I say little because her death takes up 1/2 of a pasuk in this week's parsha. It says in Perek Chaf, pasuk Aleph, Vayavo b'nei Yisrael, and b'nei Yisrael came kol ha'eda, all of the congregation, Rebbetzin to Rebbetzin, b'chodesh harishon, in the first month, Vayeshev ha'am b'kadesh, and the people settled in Kadesh, v'tamas sham Miriam, v'tikaver sham. And Miriam died there, and she was buried there. Literally 5 words to let us know quietly that she died. Now, in contrast, we see when Moshe dies, it says, when Aaron dies, it says, Vayivku es Aaron shloshim yom kol beis Yisrael. And they cried for Aaron for 30 days, all of the people of Yisrael, all of the house of Yisrael. When Moshe dies, at the end of the Torah, obviously in Vazos HaBracha, it says, Vayivku b'nei Yisrael es Moshe, and the people of Israel cried for Moshe, V'arvos Moav, shloshim yom vayitmu yemei v'chi evel Moshe. And they cried for Moshe for 30 days. Now, actually, there's a slight, if you're following the words closely, you'd have picked up on a slight difference between the way they cried for Moshe and for Aaron. And this always chokes me when we read Vazos Bracha at the end of the year, because when they cried for Aaron, it says that all of them cried, and it was all of them. He was truly missed by everyone. And it doesn't use the word kol for Moshe. And the Mefarshim, the commentators, tell us this is because Moshe didn't enjoy the same popularity in a certain sense as Aaron did, because Aaron was full of chesed and made peace between people. He was really loved as a people's person, whereas Moshe sometimes had to lay down the law. And I found this really heartbreaking, because he gave his everything for the Jewish people, and yet it wasn't fully appreciated because the delivery didn't always feel sweet for them. They didn't realize perhaps what they had. But either way, both of them get 30 days of mourning and crying. And what does Miriam get? Batikover Sham. She's just buried right there. And then we quickly move on to the story. So let's understand why there's the silence. What's going on here? So first,
I think we just lost. Or is it everybody? Is it just me? Anybody
I'm still
else?
here.
Okay, you're still there. Okay, it could be just mine, so carry on.
Yeah, I'm here.
I can hear.
Okay, I'll continue. So we look first of all to Rashi, and he speaks about the first part of the pasuk, where it says that first the Bnei Israel reach a point in the desert of Tzin called Kadesh. And it says here that Kol Ha'eda, all of the congregation arrive. And Rashi says about these words, Kol Ha'eda, Eda Hashlema, the complete congregation, Shekvar Mesu Masei Midbar, for the people who were supposed to die in the desert had already died, and these ones were set aside to live. During the time in the desert, there was a decree that everyone has to die during those 40 years and will not enter the land of Israel. And so the Torah is telling us that all the people who were destined to die during that time had died, and the people now were in a good place. They were in a complete place. They were ready physically and spiritually. They were the ones who were going to enter the land of Eretz Yisrael. And so Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch explains for us that Miriam dies at this point because she has brought the people to where they needed to be, and she has achieved her life's mission. This tells us that she died because she'd done everything that she was supposed to do, and therefore it was her time to move on. But we also see the shleimus, the perfection, that she did achieve everything she was supposed to. She brought them to this place of being Kol Ha'eda and about to embark on their next journey without her. Rav Hirsch teaches us that it was Miriam's influence which ensured that the women took the least part in all of the rebellions against Hashem and all of the unfortunate incidents in the Midbar. It was thanks to her that the women were not included in the decree, according to the Medrash Rabbah on Bamidbar 27:1, that everyone would have to die in the Midbar. And this is amazing. Rav Hirsch says that it's because of her zechus, because of this, that the grandmothers and mothers of the original generation of Egypt could enter the land of Israel and be able to tell the new generations firsthand what they had seen, all the miracles they had experienced, the splitting of the sea, receiving the Torah at Sinai. It was because she kept the women on this amazing righteous path. They were not punished by having to die in the desert, and therefore the new generation could have first-hand accounts and eyewitnesses of what had happened. And this would be so crucial for the Jewish people as they build their new lives, as they determine their nationhood and their identity in their new land, to have this as part of their narrative, to have, I guess, in today's parlance, what we call having survivors from a previous generation with us. And it's so, so precious. Living near me, a Holocaust survivor, who a few years ago, when she was more lucid, described in detail Kristallnacht. And now she's not able to. And I feel that I lost something by no longer being able to speak to her about it in person. I always do a bit of show and tell, if it's okay, Rebbetzin in my classes. I discovered this book. I'm a fan of quirky secondhand books. I discovered this book at a secondhand bookshop, and it's about an amazing history project that was begun by a Beis Yaakov class in America in the 1980s. They were given a project to interview women who were from pre-war Eastern Europe. If you think that in this day and age, obviously such a project would not be sadly possible. And in this book, you've got interviews with people like a daughter of the Chofetz Chaim, people who saw the shtetls. There's one account of someone who describes in such...
Aviva, where did you get it? Were there still more? Because I lent mine to somebody and
you have
I
this?
never got it back. Yeah.
Amazing. I'll try find you.
Amazing. If you can, amazing.
Yeah,
Stunning.
It's a real vintage, because in the back it's got a leaf where it explains what art scroll is. Isn't that funny? It explains that it's
that's the beginning. That's my day. That's my day.
It explains that it's the thing to translate books into English. As if like it needs explanation now. The project was so successful that these girls who did the interviews ended up publishing a book. And you've got in here accounts. One of my favorite ones is someone explaining how life in the shtetl was governed by the Yom Tovim, and they lived and breathed it. So they started preparing for Pesach before Hanukkah, when they would buy geese, and then they would wait until they were fat enough to shecht, and then they would make the chicken, the fat from them, and keep the feathers for this, and how one of them said that her father, you would see him turning white before Yom Noraim, and just describing life. And when I read this, I felt firstly hugely inspired by their stories, but secondly hugely sad, because I felt a link away from all of this. And sometimes I was reading someone's story and I felt, gosh, I wish I could ask them a question now, or gosh, I wish I could see the joy radiating from their face when they describe a particular experience instead of saying it in the printed word. And what Miriam did is she enabled people to actually speak to those who'd left Egypt and who'd seen all the miracles. And this was a massive, massive zchut, which had a legacy far beyond her lifetime. A second lesson we learn from this pasuk is the connection between the topic that precedes it. So the beginning of Parshas Chukas opens with the laws of the Para Aduma, the red heifer, which is difficult to understand and which spiritually purifies people. And Rav explains that there's a connection between the Para Aduma and a tzaddik dying, because the Para Aduma teaches us the lesson of immortality, the concept of immortality. So something which is physically dead but lives on to have a spiritual effect. Rav Hirsch says that you have to be, in his words, spiritually blind not to start to understand immortality when you encounter the death of a tzaddik. So when you see their decaying body, which had so recently been infused with spiritual strength, moral powers of thought and will, it's so hard to not understand that this is simply an empty cloak cast away. And it's a cloak of someone who's departed from here, but is very much still alive in a spiritual way. And the neshama very much still lives on. And when Miriam died, we of course have so much of Miriam still with us. As a brief side point, I'd like to tell you the story of someone who also left behind a huge spiritual presence. And you can read her full story in this book about Edmonton Federation Cemetery. And the lady is Rebbetzin Saralea Lopian, wife of the famous Rav Elia Lopian. And she's buried in Edmonton Federation Cemetery. Now, lots of people think that if you want to see Kivrei Tzadikim, you have to go on these tours and trips to Europe or to Eretz Yisrael. They're all brilliant, but friends, we have amazing Kvarim to visit here in England. And I did a lot of research writing this book, and really recommend anyone to go and see the base Kvarim in Edmonton, because there are very, very many righteous people lying there. And Rebbetzin Saralea Lopian married Rav Eli Lopian in 1895, and she moved with him to Kelm, where he started a yeshiva for 60 people, for 60 Bochurim. And not only did she support him in building the yeshiva, but she personally looked after the 60 Bochurim as if they were her children. So she cooked 3 meals for them. She took care of all their needs. And at the same time, she had 13 children who she raised herself. They moved to London, and her father said to her, "You're mad. I can't believe your husband's taking you to such a tamei place. You should move to Yerushalayim. Don't worry, divorce him and I'll look after you." And she said no, because she believed in what her husband was doing and the Torah that he was teaching. And she, of course, stayed with him. And he was, of course, very successful. And they were there in London for 25 years. But in 1930, Rav Elia fell seriously ill. And the Rebbetzin Saralea davened to Hashem that he should take her in his place. She said, "HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I've done my bit for this world. I've helped my husband with setting up a yeshiva. I've encouraged and nurtured him while he grew in Torah. And I've raised my children. I've got 13 children. They're fine now. The world doesn't need me as much as it needs him. He needs to carry on teaching Torah, but I've contributed now, so take me instead." And as he then began to recover, and proportionately to his recovery, she began to fall ill. and then she was nifta at the age of 49, having not seen any of her children come to the chuppah. And her kever is in Edmonton Cemetery. The amazing thing is there's a tombstone there. She's not buried there anymore because they interred her remains to Eretz Yisrael. Legend has it that when they opened up the kever, her mouth was intact, and people say that she never spoke Lashon Hara during her life. And this is someone this is 1930, this is not hundreds of years away from our own time. And we could also say perhaps that her pure tefillas made some schus for her mouth, and her remains were moved to Eretz Yisrael. However, when we went on a tour with Rabbi Bixenspanner of the Federation Cemetery, he said, this place is still considered halachically to be a Makom Kaddish, a holy place, because her remains were once here. And there's still something of her presence and her neshama, just something about this place has Kedusha, and therefore it's appropriate we should say Tehillim here. I couldn't think of a more appropriate modern day example to recognize that we're not mortal, that we have neshama and we have guf, and that for a tzaddik they certainly live on in the world. The second element of the relevance of Parah Aduma is that a tzaddik is mechaper. A tzaddik atones for people in the same way that the Parah Aduma would atone for people. So as the Gemara says in Moed Katan 28a, Amar Rabbi Ami, Lama Nismacha Misas Miriam of Parshas Parah Aduma. Why is the death of Miriam connected to coming right after Parah Aduma? To tell you, ma Parah Aduma mechaperes, of Misatan Shel Tzadikin mechaperes. That the Parah Aduma atones for people's sins, just like the death of a tzaddik atones for people's sins. The Parah Aduma cleans us like a mother cleans her soiled child. Bnei Yisrael, the Jewish people, are considered a child to Hashem. And the Medrash tells us that when Moshe passed the yoke of leadership onto Yeshua, he told him that Bnei Yisrael are still like a child. He said, be gentle with your leadership, be loving, give them allowance. They're like a child, they're still growing up spiritually. And it says in Hosea 11:1, Ki nar Yisrael va'ohavehu, because Yisrael is a child and I love him, I being Hashem. U'mitzrayim karasi livni, and I took him out of Mitzrayim to call him my son. In the same way, Miriam looked after the Bnei Yisrael and spiritually cleansed them and made sure that the women were, the righteous women that they were able to lead the way into Eretz Yisrael. Just like her mother atones for her children, so too Miriam did for us. If we look at Rashi, in the pasuk after Miriam dies, something sad happens. So Miriam dies, she's buried, no one does or says anything, and we move on. But then, in pasuk base of Perek Chaf, v'lo haya mayim la'eza, the congregation did not have water. V'yikalu al Moshe v'al Aaron, and they gathered against Moshe and Aaron. So suddenly now, for 40 years, they've had a well that gives water, and suddenly, after Miriam passes, there's no water. What does Rashi say? Lo haya mayim la'eda, there was no water for the congregation. Mekan, from here, we see shekol 40 shana haya lahem haba'er b'zchus Miriam. From here we see that the well must have been in Miriam's chus for all those 40 years. So wow, it took until she died and the water disappeared for people to realize, oh, that was in the chus of Miriam. And sometimes we don't appreciate what we have when we have it. It didn't feel spectacular to me that my car should turn corners until one day it suddenly didn't. And the Jewish people managed to wander for 40 years without realizing that this well came from Miriam. We know, of course, that the three leaders, Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam, each had a gift that was in their zechus. And in fact, Micha, who was the Navi during the first Beis HaMikdash, who tried, or one of the Nevi'im during the first Beis HaMikdash, who tried to put the people straight for their insincerity, for their oppressing the poor, for their corruption, he tells the people in 6:4 of Micha, Sefer of Micha, he says, Hashem says Did I not send before you 3 leaders to instruct you on how to live? And elsewhere in Micha, he says to the people, this is what your mission is. Hagid lacha adam ma tov v'ma Hashem daresh mimcha. You've been told, man, what is good and what Hashem requires of you. Ki im asais mishpat, to do, number 1, justice. We'll come back to these, what these are. Number 1, justice. Va'avas chesed, number 2, loving kindness. V'hatznei aleches es im elokecha, and to walk modestly with your God. Micha is telling him, this is like the formula in life. These are the 3 things Hashem wants from you. Mishpat, avas chesed, hatznei aleches. And Rav Hirsch says that this pasuk, this instruction in life, connects to the 3 leaders, and we're going to go and see how. And it connects to the gifts that they brought to the Jewish people. So you have firstly Moshe, whose gift was the man. It was brought in his zechus. What was Moshe's core quality? It was mishpat, which means the norm of right, living life exactly in the way of the Torah, exactly according to the laws of the Torah. And the man was in his zechus because he was the transmitter and the cultivator of all the mishpat teachings of Hashem. Justice and doing the right thing is like bread from the heaven. It's the stuff we need to give us the health and the strength to sustain all human and national life, according to Rav Hirsch's beautiful explanation. And he says, therefore, it's fitting that Moshe's gift was the man. Aaron's gift was the Ananei HaKavod, the clouds which shielded and protected them. In the hot weather, they cooled them down. In the cold weather, they warmed them up. They shielded them from physical attack. And in fact, Rav Hirsch says the clouds even shielded them on a spiritual level from the harshness of the din. It was like a buffer, just to soften things. Aaron is described in Sanhedrin 6b in the Talmud as a rodef shalom. He pursued peace. And the cloud, and did so much chesed. And the cloud is the ultimate chesed, is the ultimate settler and maintainer of peace by providing the perfect conditions for life, by giving shelter, by giving cool, by giving warmth, protection. So this is Aaron's gift. And now we come to Miriam's gift, which was the well. Miriam was known for her tznius. She was the ultimate cultivator of tznius. In her journey, we see her often as facilitating and encouraging others. She doesn't take center stage. She's the midwife. She's waiting by the water. She's leading the women in song and getting them to sing. She's summoning a wet nurse to feed Moshe. She's nurturing often from the sidelines, building up other people. A well is something deep down under the ground, hidden from view. It's sanua, and it therefore reflects well Miriam's quality of hatznei aleches im elokecha, of walking modestly before your God. You don't need to be center stage to affect attention, to affect change, to influence people, or to make a difference. And Miriam teaches us the power of tznius to draw up the holiness from the hidden depths. Holiness can really only come with the tznius, with this modesty. Now we come to the lack of appreciation. The Kli Yakar tells us that the well was taken away as a punishment. He says, and he uses the word onesh, punishment. The Kli Yakar says on Pasuk base, Lo haya mayim la'eda, the congregation did not have any water, al tzad ha'onesh, because of a punishment. Chasru hamayim, the waters were lacking. Lefi shelo hispidu ha'karoi, because they did not give her an appropriate eulogy. Kiba Moshe va'Aaron nemar, for about Moses and Aaron, it says, Vayivko some Bnei Yisrael, and the Bnei Yisrael cried for them. V'kan lo nemar, and here it doesn't say that Vayivko some, they cried for her. V'nemar v'tamasham v'tikavresham, she just died there, I was buried there, full stop. Kiba makam shemes Hashem tehek v'rasa la'alta v'nishkacha kames melev, v'lo hugishu b'ha'edra, kalal al kach nechseru lehem amayim. כדי שידעו למפרע שבהבאר היה בזכות Miriam. So because they did not understand just what a presence she had and just what a difference she made for them, therefore the water was stopped so they would understand that the water had all been in her merit all along. This is, I think, the saddest lesson to take from this Parsha, because so often we have righteous people living amongst us and we don't recognize enough what they do for us. We don't recognize that the world is being kept alive by their righteousness. We don't recognize that we can learn so much from them. And again, when I try and think of a contemporary example, someone instantly springs to mind, and that is Rebbetzin, who was Nifta a couple of years ago. And when she was Nifta, I was speaking to a friend about her, and the friend said to me, you know, the funny thing about having Rebbetzin Knopfler with us was that she almost tricked us, because she was so accessible that you almost forgot that she was such a tzaddikus. And we both shared that we really regretted not taking more advantage of the connection that we had from her and not learning more from her. And she's someone from whom I learned so much. If I could share just one lesson from her, she once taught about the story of Sarah through the lens of a pasuk in Eishes Chayil, Chagor va'oz masneha v'ta'ametz zoroseha. It talks about the woman literally on a physical level. I think the flowery English is she girds her loins with strength. It's like a woman waking up in the morning and, so to speak, flexing her muscles ready to begin a day's work. It's a picture of strength. Rebbetzin Knopfler brought the Yalkut Shimoni, a medrash that said that this pasuk refers to Sarah's story, particularly a point in Sarah's life, which was when the angels came to tell her that she would be having a baby, and Abraham asked her to make bread for the guests. And that making bread was the ultimate sign of strength. So you could ask, well, I mean, Sarah did very many impressive things in her life. Is this the one that's the ultimate source of strength? What does that mean? And Rebbetzin Knopfler answered, Sarah had just had the news of her life. Already an elderly lady, she found out she was going to have a baby. You can only begin to imagine the various emotions running through her mind. Elation, fear, surprise, shock, ecstasy. And then she has to tend to someone else whose immediate need is in front of her and needs to take precedence over her own needs. And she's able to push her own stuff into a different box in her mind and get on with the task at hand of meeting the needs of the people around her who need her. And so often in life, as women, that is our avodah, that is the work that we have to do. We've got so much of our own going on, we've got so much that we're dealing with other people, but sometimes there's someone right in front of us who needs us. And our job is to push the other stuff aside and concentrate and focus fully on the person in front of us who needs us now. And that is a real emotional skill to master, to be able to push your own stuff to a box and help someone else. And that's just one of the many things that I learned from Rebbetzin Knopfler. And I think it's a fitting one to share during the share about Miriam, because we see so often that Miriam thought first about the people around her and was a true leader in that way. We'll move on to two further points about the well. The first is the symbolism of water. Women are connected to water. And the Biala Rebbe says that all life depends on water, and that too often we don't recognize the women's role in drawing these waters from the deep. Something a bit silly comes to mind, but there was a joke in one of the Jewish kids magazines that my kids read last week. It said the following, I hope I get it right. It was a riddle. There was a father and a son who were in a car crash, and they were taken to 2 different hospitals. And when the son arrived, the surgeon said, I can't operate on this child because it's my son. And the riddle was, how can that be? And the answer was, the surgeon is the mother. And I think the assumption was that no reader would possibly think that a woman could be a surgeon. But guess what? Women can be so many things and are so many things. And they really sustain the people and keep us alive. The purity of the whole nation depends on the waters of the mikveh and of the waters prepared with the ashes of the para aduma. Water also symbolizes Torah and is the basis of everything. And all of these qualities, the purity, the Torah, they're all symbolized in the well of Miriam, in this be'er. Lastly, we move on to Miriam's role in getting everyone through the galus. We know, of course, she was the one who encouraged her parents after they split up to be back together again and have Moshe. We know that she waited for Moshe. We know that she stood up bravely to Paro and his decree to kill the baby boys. We know that she encouraged and led the women in song. And it's not so straightforward that the crossing of the Yam Suf was all an easy thing or a straightforward thing. And in fact, there are midrashim that say that when the Jewish people reached the end of the Yam Suf, they already then started saying that they wanted to go back to Mitzrayim. And the malachim came, the angels came, complained to Hashem and said, look, this is who you bring out of Egypt. And Hashem said, no, as we said earlier tonight, they are children still. Bnei Israel is still a child, forgive them. But Miriam was the one who got the women to stand up and sing and praise Hashem, give halal, be happy and grateful for all the miracles that they'd had. And it's in the merit of righteous women that we get through exile, and we will, please God, get through this exile as well. One role that the women played during Mitzrayim, and we mentioned Miriam's role in being a midwife, but something else the women did was encourage their husbands to continue to have children, even when life seemed so bleak and their spirits were so worn that they were not interested in family life. And we're told that the women would use these copper mirrors, make themselves look beautiful, go out to greet their husbands when they came back from a long day of slave labor, and entice them into having more children. And we see in Parsha Vayakhel, when Moshe is gathering all the materials that were donated for the Mishkan, for the tabernacle, and sorting what we would build, where it should all go, we see something curious. There's a kior, which is a sink copper lava, which is eventually made from these mirrors. The women donated the mirrors to the Mishkan, and it made this copper sink. But the copper sink is presented in an interesting way in the Pesukim of the Parsha, because it's presented as its own paragraph. You have spaces in the Torah which delineate paragraphs. Some what are called open, some what are called closed. But the Parsha flows quite nicely. And then there's a gap. Then there's one pasuk which says, "Vayais esakir nechoshes," and he made the lava of copper. Ves kano nechoshes, and its stand of copper. The maros hatzvas hashetz of upesach oel mode, from the mirrors of these women when it stood at the entrance of the oel mode. And then there's another break, and then we carry on with all the rest of the materials and what they made. And the question is, why is there this break? Why are these things kind of almost put to the side? And the commentators tell us that Moshe literally did want to put them to the side and saw these mirrors and thought, oh gosh, that kind of thing doesn't belong in the Mishkan. And Hashem said to him, not only does it belong, Moshe, but it belongs in a very prominent place, because that kior was put right in a place where the Kohanim had to come and wash their hands at the beginning of their avodah, of their service every day. And they had to look at this copper and remind themselves of this message, remind themselves that everything in the world is neither good nor bad. It's all about how we use it. Do we use it for purity? Do we use it for good? There was a good and a beautiful thing that the women did. And when the Kohanim were about to enter the Mishkan, or later in the Jewish journey, the Beis HaMikdash, they were about to do work which some of the time was singing and davening and meditating on the most beautiful thoughts, and some of the time was sweeping and chopping and sprinkling and spraying. And they had to remind themselves that nothing is good or bad. Everything is here to be elevated and given a higher purpose. And so for this, they stood at the copper sink and they had to wash their hands. Hands represent the symbol of action. They're the part of us that acts. And so they commit themselves to using all of their actions to serve God in a true and in a positive way. And the original message for this comes from those women who understood this and got the nation through the goddess. May Hashem give all of us the strength to emulate the ways of Miriam, to nurture our own wells of Torah, of wisdom and of modesty, so that we too can be among those righteous women and whose merit Mashiach will come.
Amen.
Amen. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, I know you know what it is that sometimes when we feel, and I know that it's when we go to Eretz Yisrael, or we go to Uman, or we go to Bedicha, wherever we go, we think that we're going, and there are many, as you said, there are many like amazing people that are actually buried here. And one of the people that we go to daven at regularly is actually the kever of the Shotzer Rebbe. And people specifically come through London to be here on a Friday morning on an Erev Shabbos before Chatzai, so that they can go and daven by the Shotzer Rebbe's kever. And but I think that one of the amazing things that you have brought home so beautifully is really how we need to really get the access and connect ourselves from our, as we say, our Bat Mitzvah program is called Links. And we, each and every one of us, are really part of those links that connect us back to Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. And we are those golden links. And sometimes we don't value those people that are really closest to us and to be able to learn from them. And we're also very blessed that every Thursday morning we have Rebbetzin Rachel Silber from Eretz Yisrael on. And there's so much, and there's so much to really access. So thank you for bringing Miriam to us to life, and Mirz Hashem, that we should all recognize within ourselves that space of the ability to become part of the Nashim Tzadkaniot, and really to know that we are part of that group of people that are going to be responsible for bringing Mashiach. So we can just work a tiny bit harder. And the way that we get to that is by learning about these women. And last week, I'm just going to share with you, and I'm going to get my dough to make our Parsha. But 2 weeks ago, I can't remember when, I'd helped to set up a program from America. And whatever, something happened, I had to get people to host people. And some of these people literally, they knew nothing about the Yiddishkeit. And it was
Joe, you muted.
Muted yourself, Joe.
You muted.
I just moved my thing, thank you. Anyway, something had happened in one of the houses where someone had, I don't know exactly what happened, but it wasn't so comfortable for the woman of the house. And she phoned me and she said, I don't know what to say, but I must be careful. And then she said, and you know what? Actually, I'm working on Henny Machlis. I'm just reminding myself that I've got to have a little part of me that's Henny Machlis. And I thought, that is so beautiful, because if anybody hasn't yet read or heard or learned about Henny Machlis, it's so important for us to read about it and to learn and to connect ourselves to these people. And Henny, I think one of her biggest things was that she wasn't from this great rabbinic lineage. She was just a simple, beautiful Jewish woman who wanted to serve Hashem and his children. And her home was so open, and it was such an incredible thing just to hear somebody here and say, I've got to like pull on those things of getting connected. So that's what we have to do, and it's beautiful. So thank you. That was very, very inspiring. And give me 1 minute. If anybody has any questions, please ask them now while I get my dough. I think I'm going to have to move my whole machine.
Thank you very much, Aviva. Appreciate it. Thank you. There must be more to Miriam that we really don't know.
Let's try one more time.
And I don't know, just always think there's so much more to this. The ladies in Tyra, just because of sneers, we don't know so much about it.
It's, I mean, to me, it's quite baffling. Can you imagine how tenacious she must have been for people not to realize for 40 years that their source of water is from her? So as you say, the parts of her story that we're taught are the ones that we're supposed to learn from. But obviously there's so much else about her life that we just don't know. But the Torah brings us the parts which are relevant for us, which we have to learn from.
But I think say that again.
I'm looking forward to meeting her one day. I've got the tambourine now, haven't I, Joanne?
I've got my 3 tambourines in front and we're looking forward to more. We've got them all. I was going to go and get it down, but that's what we're doing. And absolutely. And I think that that is part of it. But I think that the amazing thing for all of us, and certainly for myself, is that we have no clue about who these people really are and where. And when you look at any person that you meet, we realize we know such a tiny little bit about them, like Rebbetzin Knopfler and, you know, Lady J. And we thought we even knew, but nobody knew anything. And you know, when we see this, and when you meet Lahavdil, Rebbetzin Ehrentrain, and you learn about Grandma Rebbetzin Devorah Sternbuch. And these are people that they write here. Lily, Lahavdil, Lily, she should live to 120. You know, when we see this, we just got to recognize that Hashem is so awesome. And it's tough sometimes. It really is. You know, enough. I don't have to do it all. But actually, you know what? Hashem sends us and he puts us here for what we hear. So my dough is ready. I actually did enough in this bowl, Baruch Hashem. My sourdough will only be tomorrow. So if anybody does want, please let me know. And let's go. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvosav v'tzivanu lahafrish chala min ha'isa harei zu chala. In the zechus of the mitzvah of hafrashas chala, may we be zoche to greet Mashiach, to find it within each and every one of us, to make sure that we do what we know our Kadosh Baruch Hu wants of us, that he should send refuahs, Yeshuas to all of Klal Yisrael. And Emir Hashem, just send Mashiach very, like now.
Amen.
Okay.
Amen.
Emir Hashem, we won't be fasting next week because Mashiach will be here already. And I'll just say that our twins were born on the 23rd of Tammuz, and we'll speak about it more. But when they were, after they were born, I asked Rav Noivitz, Tzaddik Livracha, Shaila, about whether I should be fasting on Tisha B'Av. And he said, wait. He says, if we get to the week of Tisha B'Av, you can ask your Shaila then. So the custom really, and my feeling is really, you know, please God, we won't be fasting next week. We will not be having Tisha B'Av. So let's just go with that and we'll talk about learning Emir Hashem next week. Wishing everybody a beautiful, beautiful Shabbos, a Shabbat Shalom. Thank you everyone for being with us. And thank you everybody for being with us. And Marie, nice to have you here from Gibraltar.
Thank you very much.
Shabbos.
Good Shabbos, good Shabbos, good Shabbos.